You know, I debated heavily whether or not I was even going to make a video about this, mostly because typically my rule of thumb when it comes to e-drama accusational bullshit is to ignore it entirely and not even give it any kind of pause or attention. But the issue this time is that the person in question is someone who I do have a history with, and people are actually going to believe him. And people actually are believing him. And it does actually have to do with things that go on this channel and things like that. So I thought I would give my side of the story on the basis that nobody bothered to ask me about it, which is kind of bothersome, but I'll get to that in a moment. What I do want to say, a couple things, is that this should really never been brought to YouTube. And actually, speaking of that, if you subscribe to this channel for like important things, and by important things I mean things that have to do with video games that you actually want to watch. I don't mean to say that video games are important. I phrased that poorly. What I mean is if you subscribe to this channel for video game reviews and don't want to waste your time with petty e-drama bullshit that really should never have been brought to YouTube in the first place, then please stop watching now, because you're wasting your time. And I don't want to waste your time. I'm going to say a couple things before I begin. One, Patreon is gone. The whole thing, I just said screw the whole thing, because it's not worth it. It's not worth it because this is starting to affect things that it shouldn't affect. The whole point of the Patreon thing was so that I could earn a bit of extra money off of these videos. I don't make a lot of ad revenue at all. Ad revenue is garbage, basically. Unless you get millions of views, like PewDiePie or something, you don't make anything off of ad revenue. That's the whole reason Patreon exists, and plenty of other people use it. But apparently I'm not allowed to, because I have a real job, and evidently that means I'm making enough money to support myself and my son. I'm just going to refrain from explaining why that's not true at all, but we're not going to get into that yet. But I said fuck it, because it was supposed to help me and my son, and it's starting to hurt that. There's a risk of it hurting that. Mostly because, here's the thing, we're talking about David, and I'm sure you figured that out by now. And his little video he made about me, which is linked in the description if you really want to go watch it, where he hurls a gajillion pieces of accusation at me, calling me all sorts of name under the sun, which is funny for a few reasons, but mostly I'm making this video on the basis that he sort of crossed the line on a couple marks. You don't bring my kid into this kind of situation, okay? You can say whatever you damn well please about me. You know, had it been just me, I probably wouldn't have said anything, but the fact he had the nerve to talk about my relationship with my son, the only reason I wake up in the morning anymore, you don't get to do that. That's not okay. That's not okay by any stretch of the imagination. Alright, that's the first thing. The second thing is that what he didn't tell you, which was a lot, there's a lot he conveniently left out, which I like, you know, because it makes him look like the good guy in the situation when he's not, but we'll get into that in a second. The parts he left out were, how about the fact that because we're not friends anymore, he decided to make it a point to, when he made that video, to go out of his way to message each and every one of my current friends, the ones I still have, and encourage them to watch that video in an attempt to make it so that I have no friends at all, because that's what he thinks I deserve. I feel like most of you are smart enough to realize that I don't have to explain why that's a terrible, horrible thing to do to anyone. Whether or not you don't like me, or whether or not, you know, you don't enjoy my videos, or you think I've fucked up in the past, because I damn sure have, is besides the point. I wouldn't even dream of doing that to somebody else, whether I hate them or not. There's plenty of people online I've met that I don't like at all. I wouldn't go out of my way to try to destroy their relationships with other individuals. That's a disgusting thing to do. And kind of creepy, though I'll get to the creepy in a second. So, the part of this that really affects you guys is the financial accusations. Mostly that he took issue with the Patreon thing because he said, "Oh, you're e-begging, and you work. I don't think you actually work that much, and you're just using your son, exploiting him to make more money," which is absolutely ludicrous. I heavily debated incorporating Jack in that video at all for exactly this reason, because I was afraid people would think that. I wanted to include him because I thought it would be a cute thing to do. Had I wanted to exploit him, I would have used him in the whole video. I wouldn't have used the doll. Also, the only reason that video existed was because I had reinstated the perks on Patreon, a Patreon that I'll have you know had existed for over a year up until this point. Without question. Nobody said a word about it until now. Now all of a sudden, "Oh, that's terrible, I can't believe you would do it." Now it's a problem. Before it was fine, but now that I've reinstated the perks that I had before that I took away, specifically so I could get caught up with the reviews that I still owe people, now it's an issue. Okay, we can roll with that. As for my financial situation, I don't really feel like explaining to you how much money I make exactly, but I will. I actually have a pay stub in this drawer here somewhere. Let me find it real quick. I actually found it the other day when I was just sifting through for something else. Here it is. This is probably a really old one, but it should still be relatively accurate because I did get a raise recently, but it was less than $1, so it barely constitutes that much, at least in terms of weekly pay. Let me look at this. Oh, it's actually a really nice one because this was... Yeah, this was a good one because this... How many hours did I work on this one? Woo! This is actually a really good one. This one I'm looking at. I'll bring it up here. That way you can show this is actually a pay stub. I don't really feel like showing you anything else on the basis that this is personal confidential. That's nothing you really need to worry about. Mostly because it has like personal financial information on here that I don't really feel like the internet knowing. But what I will say is, on this date, this was 10/15/2014. So this was almost a year ago now. This was for 2 weeks' pay, was $784, almost $800. That's for 2 weeks. That is after I had to pay out half of my child support for the month, of which half of it is $211.27, plus my medical insurance and my dental insurance, which amounts to about $50 per 2 weeks. So it's $100 a month for that. And that's also not counting all the state taxes that came out. This was actually a pretty good check because I had worked, let's see on here, it was overtime, so that's almost, actually this is almost 120 hours. This is actually just about 60 hours a week, like I told you that I worked. Because he accused me of not working that much. He says, "Oh, you don't work 60 hours a week." I do. I have been. Part of the reason why it's taken so long to get a lot of these reviews out is because I've been working so much. So I put priority into my real job. Okay? And I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And if you still don't believe me, keep in mind that if I wasn't working, I wouldn't be able to pay child support and I wouldn't be seeing my son whatsoever. Because Pennsylvania, where I live, is, I think, the only state in the union that when it comes to child support, forces automatic wage garnishment for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are or what kind of situation it is, they automatically just garnish your wages out. That way they make sure every single person is always paying the child support, which is a pretty good system for getting it done. So that's where all that money's going. So in my pocket per month, in a good month with full hours, I am pulling in about $1,600 a month off of my job. I stress good month because recently it's been slow, and I actually have been working a little bit less in the last few months. I've been averaging maybe 54, 55 hours a week rather than before, where I was doing 60. It's been a little less because, again, it's a slow month. Once we hit fall again, hit our busy season, I guarantee I'll be back in that frickin' warehouse for 60+ hours a week if I have to be. I work. And the accusation that I don't is completely ridiculous. I'm so sorry if I felt the need to supplement my already somewhat questionable income, because I don't make that much at my job. Just because I work a lot of hours doesn't mean I'm making that much. Because the thing about David is that I don't think he remembers what it was like when he was just starting out. He makes a lot of money at his job. Like, he pulls 80-hour. I'll give it to him. He pulls like 80-hour weeks, And while at the same time, sorry, my monitor decided to go into sleep mode. While at the same time, pulling in, I think last I checked was like $20 an hour. I think he makes more than that now. He makes a lot of money. Way more than me. And he doesn't have a kid to worry about. The other thing you're not considering is that I have student loans to worry about. You want to talk about those? Because I fucking will. I actually have a couple emails on here, which again I won't show you because personal financial information, from my loaning agency. My minimum payment for 2 of my loans, this is the private ones, just 2 of them. One is $28.79, a little less than $30 a month, which isn't too bad. The other one is $216.09 per month. That's the minimum payment on that. That's not including all the federal loan, which is for way more, like total $30,000, which I actually had to put on hold for a year because I couldn't afford to pay it, because they wanted like something like a minimum payment on that's like $300, something really high. Post expenses, you know, plus gas to get to work, because I have a half-hour commute. I mean, the loans are sucking a lot of money out, and the 2 credit cards that I owe money on, which I have to pay $100 a month on each month for each one. So that's $200 again until I get that paid off. So that's, let's see, on a good month I make $1,600, $200 for that. That's, I mean, we're already down to $1,100 a month, which still isn't bad. But you're not including things like gas and food, because I do eat. Expenses that I pay for my son that isn't child support. You know, because the money that I send to my ex is just hers. Like, she can use it however she wants. I have no idea where it goes. But as for me personally, I mean, I don't know. I don't have that much money. Alright, I don't. And I work a lot, but I'm not a rich guy. I think that's abundantly clear. Do you really think that if I could afford it, I would still be living with my parents? Because I wouldn't. I can assure you of that. The only reason I'm still here, because honestly, you might be saying, can't you afford to move out at this point? I could. In theory, if it weren't for the loans, which are sort of wringing me dry a little bit sometimes, but I could, in theory, get out of here. The issue with that is that not only would that add a huge expense when it comes to rent, but it wouldn't be beneficial for my kid to do that. Because the thing about my parents' house is that he has his own room here. He has a huge yard to run around in. He has plenty of space to be happy. Because I don't have him down here. This is my room. He's almost never down here. He's upstairs with the rest of my family. I'm up there with him. That's the reason why you don't see me streaming whenever I have him. I'm not down here usually. I went down here like once for that little clip you saw, and that was about it. You know, because he has his own bedroom and everything. If I moved into an apartment, he wouldn't have as much space. And it'd be way more of a hassle. And he probably wouldn't have his own room. I mean, if it makes me a loser, fine. But if it's better for him, then I'll be a loser. Alright? I don't really care at this point. So, that's my financial situation. I mean, I'm still making, you know, if you look at it, cursory examination, I'm still pulling in at least $1,000 a month. Plus, but that's not kind of the loans, you know, that I'm not paying right now, that are on hold, which we don't want to talk about. I mean, if I got to the nitty-gritty and didn't spend money on, like, anything at all, like, I probably could start making money. I have actually started saving quite a bit of money. I've actually done a pretty good job doing that recently. I'm not gonna lie. But there's unexpected, like, my car, for example, has been iffy lately. Like, I'll probably have to get that fixed. I mean, there's things you're not considering, is what I'm trying to say. Like, if I didn't need the money, it wouldn't ever be an issue. Speaking of money, and speaking of things that I owe you, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact you brought up last year when I did that GoFundMe campaign to pay off. That was the one private loan got way out of control. As you can see with the minimum payment to $219, that's actually the minimum it'll ever be. That's actually pretty low. Because the problem is I wasn't able to afford it back then because I didn't have a job. And it inflated to, like, I think it was like $1,200, which is what I did the GoFundMe campaign for. Specifically, you might be saying, well, where'd that money go? It went straight to the loan.